I feel like sometimes we look at the sober dating pool just like you look at any dating pool that is, specific to, your identity, whatever that might be, as small. It's like freaking rich. Like, what a great group of people you have to choose from. Like, what a cool community. Like my favorite people are people who have done this work because they've done this work. So there's a big old gold medal.
Stories are powerful.
Welcome to the Rise, Recover, Live podcast, brought to you by The Phoenix. This is a space where people impacted by substance use can come to share their story of strength and resilience, get open and honest, and inspire hope and build community through shared experience.
We'll be talking to people in our community on their own recovery journey and shine a light on the topic of recovery in all its forms. Maybe you'll hear some of your story in theirs.
Let's show the world that together we rise, recover, and live.
Yo, and welcome to another episode of Rise, Recover, Live, the podcast, brought to you by The Phoenix. I am your host, Bryce the Third, and this is my wonderful, glorious co-host, Liz McKean. What's up, Liz?
Woo, wonderful and glorious. I'll take it.
All the superlatives.
Oh my goodness, I love it. Must be a good episode to start out with the word glorious. So
it definitely
we're excited to intro it today. You wanna kick us off, Bryce?
So somebody mentioned to me recently that they were having trouble finding spaces where they could have the conversation around dating while sober. And it really struck a chord in my spirit. I'm a single man and I have been navigating dating in recovery for quite some time, a few years. And me and Liz just really started getting into this conversation around what it's like to date while sober, maybe some do's and don'ts, which, spoiler alert, nobody's an expert. So you got to come up with your own do's and don'ts. But I really think it led to a great conversation between Liz and I around this topic. And so that's what we're talking about today. And if that's something that applies to you, I think you'll really enjoy this episode.
I think so too. And if you're not a single person in recovery, if you are joining us as a supporter, as a married person, as, someone who's in a relationship, this still is a really interesting conversation, because when Bryce first brought this up, that was my first thought. I'm like, all right, well, I don't know what I have to contribute to this because I am married and I was even before I got sober. But as always, even when we were originally just discussing whether to even have this be an episode, Bryce sneakily hit record and we just got the convo started, and turned out I did have things to say and kind of discovered some things about myself. We definitely got into some of Bryce's experiences, and yeah, just like he said, there's no do's, there's no don'ts. I guess the don't is that that we don't know that we don't, but I think it's important to acknowledge the things that we're all experiencing. And that it's part of this journey. So hope you can just be a fly on the wall, enjoy our convo, and let us know what you think. And
true that. And so with all that said, let's get into it.
So at the Phoenix, we say we're not a dating club. So it's like, that's great, but it's just like interpersonal relations happen. And then in AA, from my understanding, it's don't date within the first year of being sober. But from my understanding, that absolutely happens, because people are people. And also, these are people who have, our brains have been hijacked by, whatever substance, by addiction. There's a lot of scientific discussion that's outside of my realm of expertise, but we reach for things to feel better, and we just took away the ultimate thing that we use to make ourselves feel better. So often another person is that next scratching post, and to not have any kind of guidance on how to do that, I can't even imagine how hard that would be.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things where it's nobody can truly be the guru or the guide, because everybody's experience is different. And I definitely understand why they say, no dating for the first year, because if we've used, if we don't know we got to have a relationship with ourselves before we start to build something out with somebody else. And especially if I'm coming in, I'm 30 days clean and sober for the first time in my entire life. You see it a lot in treatment centers and stuff like that, where, people will attach to the girl and it becomes this thing where it's now I can focus on this. And, all the conversation around respect for other people and how to treat people in a loving way, and how to treat people with compassion and understanding. Like I've learned that those processes have to kind of like start within first. And I
Totally.
mean, at least give it a year. Like for me, like
Yeah.
I'm 9 years in, and it was just 2.5 years ago where I just started discovering what boundaries were. And I came into recovery in a relationship, and through recovery, like learning how to have respect for other people, and learning like what I defined as what love actually was. Like it made, the more I worked on that, the more like it made more sense to let that relationship go in order for that person to grow and develop, and for me to grow and develop. Like and that was something I would never have done had I been using, because like in all actuality, I used that relationship in a way just like my drug. And you know what I'm saying, like it was a comfort zone. It was a thing that it's like, when I feel these ways, I lean into this to supply me with what it is that I need. And when it comes to respect and understanding, like sometimes it's like, okay, this freaking sucks to let this go, but I think it just makes sense in respect to both of us that we figure out what it looks like apart.
No, I mean, I totally agree, because I agree that makes sense to wait to figure out who you are and create that relationship with yourself before you go out and find someone else to start a identity of your relationship together. But I also think my point, as far as organizations, institutions, like giving that direction, is that I think it also really needs to be acknowledged that it's something that people are going to struggle with. It's like, you can say like, this isn't a good idea, but I think you need some resources in order to like navigate those moments where you are reaching for somebody. Just like there's resources for an acknowledgement of cravings that are going to happen. Like, yes, obviously put down the drink, obviously put down the drug, but cool. I mean, if it was that simple, then I probably wouldn't be sitting here in, a meeting or wherever I found myself. So I think having, I don't know, and not having to necessarily go to, what is it? Shoot. What is it when people are relying too much? I'm totally going to butcher this, but it's another 12 step. Codependency. Yeah. Codependence Anonymous. And, I think just even within, to not have to like give yourself a whole new label and go to a whole nother meeting, I think which if you need that, that's great, but it's helpful to be able to acknowledge that this might be something that you come across within this journey, whether, whatever path that you're on within it. And it might not even be because you like, it could be in a lot of different, it could look a lot of different ways. Like, I'm just thinking of situations I've seen, and even like scenarios that I've created within my relationship, because, obviously I've been with Billy since before I got in recovery and then since, but there's moments that I see myself like creating drama because I just need a little bit of drama, because I'm just craving a little bit of drama, and there's going to be times that you reach for that person. There's times that there's a trauma bond, where it's like we both went through a really freaking hard thing, which, that's the case for me and my husband, but it's also the case for people who are in a treatment facility together, like we're both really scared and struggling. And like, that is such a attractive thing to reach for. And then there's other times when it's sex. There's other times when it's, nobody ever said I love you to me before. I think it can have a lot of different, I'm looking for a word that I can't find, but it'll just look a lot of different ways. Thank you.
Yeah. I think to acknowledge like that process of discovery is to be upfront and real about like what recovery looks like. Like this thing is delightfully messy, and some of those things that we talked about like before I started pressing record, my most recent circumstance, like it went to weird places, and I'm able to see like, oh, how I showed up and was willing to get transparent, open, honest, raw, build this foundation off of honesty from the jump. And like just these things that I wouldn't have had the inclination to do had I not had the previous experience, where the previous experience, I was like 1 foot in and 1 foot out, because if I keep 1 foot out, then I'll just prevent myself from being hurt. And then, when everything ended how it did, like I was still hurt. So I was like, wow, like, that person that experience deserves that designation of like how important it was to me when it was going on. And just these things that we learn as we go. And when we're active in our addictions, like we can hurt people, and it can be unintentional because maybe that wasn't our intention, but there's still a bit of responsibility that we have that maybe we're not taking responsibility for. And now, like in recovery, like we can hurt people, but the responsibility that we have, like I feel like because recovery is super intentional, like we take responsibility for that responsibility. It's like, okay, software program update, moving forward, let's not do that anymore, because I don't want to have that effect on people, because my desire is to provide clarity. My desire is to show up and support people, and all of these things that like I've learned to give to myself first. So I think that going back to like waiting a year before you start dating or looking into like contributing or creating something with somebody else, if you have the opportunity to wait that long, that's just like a good reference point, like an on-ramp to figuring out how to give these things that will be required in interpersonal relationship to yourself. Mm-hmm. And then what I've learned, like relationships, there's a spectrum, so I have a lot of I have girlfriends, right? Like girls who are my friend, and like learning to show up at that capacity. And I have like my guy friends, and I have relationships like the relationship with my mom and with my sisters, and like each one of those require for me to show up in ways that I take on my responsibility, show up and contribute in the way that I desire, and like continue to ask myself, what do I desire to show up and contribute? And it's just like, if we do it right and not right, so rights and wrongs are subjective, but if we do it intentionally, like there's some work to this, mm-hmm. just like the work that recovery is. And so I think we need a space to be able to talk about it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've seen it go the other direction too. I'm curious to what you think about this. I have a few people in my life in particular who, when they go out into relationships, they take the responsibility on so heavily that it's like they're trying to take care of the other person without the other person really needing to take care of anybody. Like they're so, they go into every conversation with so much intentionality about how their, words and actions could affect the other person. When the other person says or does something that might have an effect on them, they're like, well, let me look at that effect that it had on me, and let me just mix this up and see how I can maybe grow from it. And just kind of not holding other people accountable, or maybe even missing out on things because you're so worried about your potential to hurt other people, because you are so aware of your part in, like you're walking around almost feeling like you're a risk to everyone that you have a relationship with, because we all are, but we're so self-aware, and sometimes we absolve others of being that self-aware. So maybe that is the codependence piece, but I don't know. I feel like you can sometimes just overcompensate.
Yeah, I think it's a dance. And I think like when you speak, like I've had the experience of being like extreme self-responsibility, and like no one can hurt me because I'm responsible for the pain that I feel. And and I think like there had to be some of that. Like I had to have that experience of like running into like building my philosophy, which I've never had philosophy. I've always just kind of been a floater, right? Like whatever was whatever. But now building that philosophy, and as I build out that philosophy, kind of like testing it in real life circumstances and context, and then getting that feedback, like error, that didn't work, and then adjusting and updating, and then trying it again, getting back out there and continuing to show up for myself. And like, I think self-compassion is big, where it's like, yo, you gotta continue to, when you need you, like show up, so, okay, you got it wrong. Or you, in order to get it right, you had to have this, you had to be super strong. Cause there was a point where I was like super detached and just like, stainless, like the way I would describe it was like like this, a stainless steel kitchen. Like it was just like sterile. Like, you know, like I don't want any attachments because, you know, I know what it's like to get my heart broken. I don't want that to happen again. And getting your heart broke, having that experience sober is like I was Googling stuff like how to like overcome heartbreak, and the first couple of things that will pop up was like, oh yeah, you know, just go get some drinks with the bros and you know, find another relationship. And it's like, all this sounds horrible and contrary to everything that I've learned in recovery. This can't be the way. And then I had to dig deeper to find tools that helped me to like cultivate wisdom through the experience. But you know, and in that wisdom cultivation, it's like you can read about, you can YouTube, you can all these things, and but then it's like, okay, how does this show up in my life, like in practice? So I've had the experience of like, oh no, it's all on me. And then, you know, really like visiting that arena and looking at it like, yo, how's the quality of my life? Like, do I feel like I'm doing a lot? And it's like, yeah, I am. So like, you know, how can we pivot? How can we soften a bit? How can I show up for myself? And you know, I still lean more towards like, okay, I'm only responsible for me. Like, but there is like an aspect of like, and I deserve, you know, to receive this. And so when seeking to build something out with somebody, like this is an ask. And like I said, discovering boundaries, like boundaries, that's part of my boundaries. It's like I need to not be in life-threatening circumstances like with you. You know,
reasonable.
like that.
Yeah.
That's that is a requirement to be able to share time with me. You know, and among a lot of other things. And I know everybody is different. And once again, that's why it's important to discover who it is that we are before we kind of embark on like creating something with somebody else. So we have this reference point for our boundaries, and we can, you know, we're not starting from an empty slate.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's really beautifully put. Boundaries is just absolutely the key. You said something that I was all excited about. Oh, it's your like the self-worth, the deserving, like to get to that point where not only do you hold yourself responsible, accountable for the way that you treat people, hold yourself accountable for the way you receive, you know, whatever it is that you receive, love and anything else. But I think that that feeling of like, I deserve love in a certain way. I deserve to feel like an equal in my relationship. I deserve for my life to be a place that I actually want to be is something that I think for a lot of us in recovery, like certainly for me, that is like kind of a fake it till you make it thing for a lot of it. You know, like you're doing all that building and doing all that learning and flexing all those muscles of having boundaries and, you know, having that relationship within yourself. But until you wake up one morning and realize that you really do believe it, that you deserve, you know, to be a full partner in a relationship, if that's what you desire to have, and what that might be, a romantic relationship or any other kind. I think that's, for me, would be the, you know, the chip that says, okay, now it's time to actually go out and seek someone else. Like I've done all the work, and also now I actually believe the thing that I'm telling myself over and over again.
Yeah, I think that'd be dope. Like if it was as clean cut and dry as a click. Oh, it's time. You know, because like I think I had to have certain experiences. For me, it's been sort of like a wash over me slowly, and still can be like a practice of like, oh, because even I think it can be inherent in some of these environments when it comes to recovery, where, you know, some of that language that as I've developed and evolved through recovery, and I think we talked about it a bit on a Gabby Brokaw episode, where it was like some of that language, like, you know, my natural state is to be drunk, or you know, you ask me how I am, and I'm like, well, I'm better than I deserve, and it's like, yes, it injects humility in a space where like like we used to be all ego. But I think after a certain amount of time of practicing some of these things, like some of that language for me, at least, has had the opposite effect. And so just like recovery and like understanding of self, I've had to grow and evolve with how I talk to myself. And so, yeah, it did feel weird when I first started saying I deserve these things. And it almost felt better. It was like, I don't even deserve, like,
Yep.
this is so great. I don't even deserve that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but I felt like after a while that became a thing that negatively chipped away at my self-image, and allow for me to put myself into circumstances that maybe I shouldn't have been enduring,
Mm-hmm.
so but in order to get to where it's like, yeah, and I deserve, which is for me a form of self-love. Like I had to
Mm-hmm.
have that experience where it's like, you know what, like, man, like I look where I came from, in comparison to
Mm-hmm.
where I came from, this is over the moon. Like I would have thought that I would be here. So, this is better than I deserve, but like learning to be like, no, I deserve to be safe. I deserve to have peace. I deserve to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
I deserve to be held, and really for me, I live by mirror theory, which is like we live in a world of which we see. Like, so
Mm-hmm.
if I tell the truth, if I am supportive, if I share my resources, then I am a living example of these things in action, and that makes me feel as if like I live in a world where other people do that.
Mm-hmm.
If I lie, then I live in a world where I'm skeptical of what you're telling me, because I know I'll be lying, right? So like
Yeah.
to say that I deserve something, that came for me, it came second to like, oh, everybody inherently is deserving, like
Mm-hmm.
I of course I deserve this because I treat people as if they inherently are deserving. I go above and beyond to create safe spaces. I go above and beyond to make sure that it's a space of peace if you with me. I go above and beyond to make sure that I hold people and that I see people. And so because I've created that and I've seen it created because I've created it, then I know it exists and I know I deserve it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I just learned a little bit about myself, because I definitely do that a lot. I think I have a weird relationship with gratitude, where for me it almost feels like if I'm grateful, then like I'm so grateful for this thing, and I almost am saying within that I don't deserve it. Like I can't even believe this happened. What did I do to deserve this? I'm so grateful. It's a very, let me put myself down a little bit. And sometimes I've been thinking about this a lot lately, where sometimes I think, am I doing that? Like, is that in itself an ego thing? Like, I want people to look at me and be like, oh, she's so grateful. Oh, she's so humble. Oh, she's so, she does, let me tell her that she deserves this, like really kind of looking for that external boost. Or at least just wanting to be a person that people can see as this, like humble, grateful person. Like, there's times that I express something about myself and someone kind of mirrors it back to me, like says, this is essentially like, this is what I'm hearing you saying. And I'm like, oh, like, I don't really like how good that felt, that I said something that was kind of self-disparaging, that you heard it in that way. And then also I wonder if that is kind of me doing that mirror thing, where I'm acting in that way or speaking about myself in that way, just like you lift yourself up in a effort to lift up everyone around you. I work very hard to create a safe space for other people around me too. But I wonder if sometimes that's a way to keep myself safe, where I'm saying, I'm so grateful, I'm, undeserving, things like that. Cause I'm really hoping everybody else feels that way too. And I'm really hoping like maybe we can all be humble together, because arrogance is something that's very, I don't know, jarring to me. So it's
Yeah,
almost like same kind of thing, like trying to create the world that I want to live in, but in maybe a little more manipulative and less healthy way.
yeah. I mean, I think there's a difference between like self-deprivation and humility, right? Like, I think that it's important, and it's almost like recovery is filled with these dichotomies. Like, I was on a call today with the Celebrate Recovery Walk and Rally. We did like this live. This is a local rally here in Detroit that I'll be speaking at next weekend for National Recovery Month. And we did this live, and we talked about we talked about uniqueness, like how people have peanut allergies, and I don't have a peanut allergy. I could eat a Reese's cup. I actually love Reese's cups, but my son can't. He has a peanut allergy, right? Like, does he rail against the world? Like, why do I have a peanut allergy and he doesn't? And let me just continue to eat peanuts until because I just can't accept it. Or does he like fit to his circumstance uniquely because like that's what he needs to be able to show up for himself? Does he see himself for like, this is just what I go through, this is my experience, and I'm gonna act accordingly? Like, I got to keep an EpiPen nearby. I'll let people know that I'm allergic to peanuts and I just don't ingest them. Same with kind of like alcoholism, where it's like, I know some people can go sip wine and go to eat Italian food and sip wine. Me, I'm not sipping it. I want the whole bottle, and it just is what it is. I don't know why that is. I can try to investigate why that is and keep trying over and over again and having these allergy attacks, right? Or I can accept like my uniqueness and design my life in a way that supports me uniquely and what it is that I uniquely go through. But then 2 sentences later, we're talking about connectivity and how not different we are. And so, because I'll hear somebody share and they'll share my story out of their mouth, but we've never met. It's like, oh, I'm not as terminally unique as I thought. So I feel like recovery is filled with these dichotomies where it's like, okay, how can I show up and create an environment within myself that allows me to see how deserving I am, and also make sure that I stay humble and in a space of humility, like at the same time. I went to a poetry night last night, and this guy did this poem, and like within 2 bars, like one bar I was laughing, the next bar I was about to cry, and it's like there was times I was about to do them both at the same time. And it's like, I think that's how, once again, beautifully, wonderfully messy that recovery can be. And you see, like, this is an episode about dating while sober, and we've come back to the work that we do in solitude. I think they both can exist at the same time. I think one probably precedes the other, but once we find it comfortable to lean into that, okay, I'm actively like seeking to create something interpersonal with someone else, like that solo solitude work still is a very big factor in how it is that I'm able to show up in partnership.
Yeah. And, so much of what we talk about in recovery, arguably all of what we talk about in recovery, is just like a microcosm of just like life, like it's, everybody has something. We're gonna have a whole nother episode about like how we feel about everyone is in recovery from something, but we all certainly have things that need healing, whether we're working on them or not. And we're all out there in the world just interacting with each other. Whether you are a person who considers yourself in recovery, whether you have somebody in your life who is, whether you are, maybe recovering from some kind of other like loss or grief, or it's just a million different things. It's not even worth listing them all, but we all have that stuff. But the thing about people that are in the recovery community, specifically like self-identified, I had a, substance use disorder or whatever it is that you call it. That typically means that person is out there doing this work, that person is out there like really sitting down with themselves, every day, ideally, to figure out like who is in there and like, why do I react in this way? And part of that is noticing the way you're reacting before the reaction just explodes all, out into the world. And I think that right there is the reason that this community is just my very favorite people. And, I'm married to a person who is, wonderful enough to regardless of the fact that he could just have one drink. I don't understand that at all, but he could just do that and just set it down. He might not even finish the drink. Like, what is that about? He doesn't, because he's with me, and like that just creates a safer environment for me if we're both sober together. So that's really lovely. But I still there's things that I can talk about, relate to people that are in the recovery community that I can't relate with my own husband with, because he's just not been necessarily forced to do that kind of work. So how cool, it's worth that price of entry. It's worth that year of holding out, and figuring stuff out within yourself, knowing that the other people that you are probably surrounding yourself are doing something similar. And I feel like sometimes we look at the sober dating pool just like you look at any dating pool that is, specific to, your identity, whatever that might be, as small. It's freaking rich. Like, what a great group of people you have to choose from. Like, what a cool community. Like my favorite people are people who have done this work because they've done this work. So just, there's a big old gold medal. There's a big old pot of gold. Metaphor is just all over the place, but you know what I'm saying. It's some gold.
Or there's Lucky Charms.
If you like
or
silver, that's fine too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to like, talk deeper into that because one, also, like, I don't know, I suggest that year's time, but like even like time, like you could spend a whole year and not do any work on yourself, and it's like you're holding on to the edge of your seat. Like, I can't wait till 365 days. I'm out here and I'm getting everybody like phone number or whatever
off the calendar.
You know. But I think it's important to say that I haven't dated anybody sober. Like in my short dating career, like within the past, 3.5 years, I haven't dated anybody in recovery. I have dated somebody in recovery, but she's still drunk. Like, would she consider herself?
So you're saying that you, as a sober person, haven't dated a person who is also a sober person. Completely, like, you've dated sober, since you've been in recovery, but you haven't dated somebody who's also in recovery.
Correct.
Got it.
And I think like for me inherently, like you have to be able to swim deep because my journey, my process, the way I've engineered my environment and the way I live, like if you can't swim, I'm gonna scare you. And so I have a lot of friends who are not in recovery who like I had a bonfire for a housewarming bonfire at my house, and I had all my friends over, and maybe none of them are identified as people in recovery, but the conversations we had around that bonfire of self-reflection, of belonging, of like just certain like different contexts, like those are the type of people that I'm attracted to. So there's this energy even outside of the recovery community, right? But totally. I haven't, and I think maybe I should speak about like why I haven't dated anybody in the recovery community. I mean, maybe because I haven't met somebody. I don't know. It's not impossible. It's not like it's a hard no. But for me, especially like within like program, like within 12-step, like I know how like weird it can be. Just like how Phoenix programming is fun, emotionally, physically safe, inclusive, and accessible. And that's because like you come here not having to worry about like, is somebody gonna try to hit on me? Like, I'm really trying to work on myself and build like sober like friends and community, like, and then I get here and it's like, hey baby, and it's like, oh man, dang, I thought I found a safe space. So like, even if I'm attracted to somebody like at a 12-step meeting, like that's the last thing on my mind, because like, oh, we here doing work, and in 12, like in Alcoholics Anonymous, it could be this thing where like girls work with girls, boys work with boys, right? My sponsor is a woman. I've always been attracted to feminine energy. I don't know why. Like maybe it's like my emotional inclination, but I feel like I've had to intentionally build like masculine energy in my life. But like I've worked with multiple women within 12-step, and so maybe that plays a role. But I just like, I'm not here to talk about, so let's go get coffee to somebody in 12-step. And then when you get there, it's like, it's something else. It's like, no, like we come in to talk about like, this work and how can I be a resource? How can I be a part of your sober recovery community in such a way that if you're going through something, you can call me and not expect me to be on no weirdo stuff, So maybe that's played a role in why I haven't like tapped in with anybody like in 12-step. And this is, once again, not to say that it could never happen. It just hasn't been my experience thus far. And that's something to consider.
Yeah. No, I'm so glad that you said that. You're totally right. Yeah. It's not like you are absolutely confined to that community. And sometimes it feels safer to find someone that you're not going to necessarily see in a meeting or wherever you were going for that safe space every day.
Yeah, because I've seen that. I gotta say this too. I've seen that happen too.
I was thinking that too.
like people met at a meeting and then they split up, and maybe it was a crazy split up, and then now they got to come to the same meeting. So for me, with that specific person, like they weren't in they still were drinking, but like they were going to a different program, and so. I stopped going to that meeting. I really liked that meeting too, but I didn't want to like come to this meeting because it was that person. It was her meetings it was her meeting first. And
Mm-hmm.
so like, I'm not sure if anybody else would have that same consideration, but I know for me,
Mm-hmm.
you know, once again, going back to that self-work, like I'd be pissed off if like I went to my meeting, this was my meeting first, and now you're coming and you're a regular now and we don't mess with each other and we came to a disagreement. It's like, ew, you know, this was my safe space and now what am I supposed to do? You know,
Right.
so it can get tricky. It can get tricky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think, gosh, I'm just thinking, you know, when I've gone to meetings and when I've been in other recovery, you know, rooms, meetings that weren't even necessarily 12-step, I mean, you are just sharing a part of yourself that you're just sharing the rawest part of yourself. And like, that's something that you might not ever share to, you know, your romantic partner, because there's just certain things. I mean, it's like the belly button lint of your soul that you're like putting out there. And maybe like, you know, they don't need to see that on the first date. So it's a lot to have that be something that you're like, that be like part of the foundation that you're building a relationship on, where you already have that just like such deep like well of information. And then also, you know, after a breakup, to continue to have that as your space where you share, it just, you probably wouldn't, you're just not going to speak the same way that you would if the person wasn't there.
Yeah, that after the breakup part freaks me out, but that other part where like that's really like that gets me going. Like the deeper you can get, the quicker you can go. Like I'm really attracted to that, and I think like being somebody in program or being somebody in recovery, like it's like, yo, like we're talking about the traumas we've experienced on the first date, you know, and like what are your triggers, and like, you know, and it's maybe even sharing some stories from a previous life and being able to laugh at it. Like those are the things that, you know, just make me feel like, oh, I can be comfortable, like I can be who I am, you know. And sometimes when you go outside of, and even like I think for me, like outside of the realm of personal development, because like you said, like recovery, I think personal development is inherent within recovery because you had to
Totally.
be on the wave of developing yourself and increasing the quality of your life to ask yourself the question, am I an alcoholic? And then putting yourself in a circumstance where it's like to be exposed to tools that can help people who identify as such, right? So that there's personal development inherent in that. And so I think within my communities and within my friend groups, like that's the commonality, whether it be, you know, from the artist community here in Detroit and beyond throughout the nation, whether it be recovery, whether it be within a podcasting community, or whether it be like, you know, friends, like just in general that I just met out while I was out and about, like the commonality is that we all work on ourselves. You know, and in that working on yourself, like to have a space where you can share some of those deep, dark places that you go in the midst of that process, and like do it with someone that can handle that, hold that, because they have handled that and held that for themselves. I think it's like one of the blessings of being able to like date within these communities with people who are, you know, because other people would just get freaked out, like what, and they run.
Oh, yeah.
And for me, that's cool. I appreciate that because it's weeding you out. You not, you know, you got to go because you're not ready. Like that was,
You can't handle
you
it.
ain't even heard. We haven't even started.
Yep. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I can think of about 100 examples of that when I've said something in like public or to a person that I just met, you know, in passing, that I'm like, oh, like that time that this happened, and
You're
the
like,
horror. Yeah, exactly. Like,
what did she
I'm gonna
just say?
back up. Like, you know, what are you? Are you hiding? Hiding all your utensils? Like, I'm good. That was old me. Like, I'm all right. Yeah. No, you're totally right. I think when I think about that, because I'm certainly, obviously, like to have the real conversations. Wouldn't be here if I didn't. But it's one thing to have it one-on-one. My friend was here in my apartment doing some work today. Thursdays are coffee date in the morning, and then sometimes we'll just, you know, spend the day just working. We both work from home. And I was like, I'm about to get on a podcast and I need you to leave. Like, I know that, you know, we have like the deepest conversations. I also know that this conversation that you and I are having, Bryce, is going to go out to, you know, hopefully hundreds and hundreds of people. But also, like, if you're here listening to it, I won't be able to do it. So it's a different feeling, you know, talking to like an individual or the person who's right in front of you, and like really having that energy exchange versus, you know, aiming it at maybe a group or somebody else. So there's just like, it's a different way of presenting yourself. And I know we've talked a lot about like integration of self. So for me, that's probably a lot of work that happens to happen for me, just to even like have that be like a flag that pops up. But I guess if anybody else out there feels that way, me too.
The journey continues.
The journey continues. Wait, I'm not all done? I don't understand.
You'll never be done.
I'm shocked by that
and I
information.
think as a summation to kind of like put on, as a bookend to this conversation is just, if you have the question around when should I date sober, how should I date sober, who should I date sober, you're not the only one having this conversation. And, I wish I could give you like a solidified, like, this is how you do it answer. But I think that answer would be that there is no solidified answer. And just like recovery was in solitude, it's important for us to show up for the process and what it is that we desire. And a lot of that is just going to start at home, at the crib, in the mirror. And the more we look in that mirror, the more we see how we show up, and the more we develop and design our environment to support how it is that we desire to show up. And the more we practice showing up for ourselves and for others, but like for ourselves first and foremost, I think what ends up happening is inherently like that pull to show up for others will guide us in a way that is unique to us. And if we listen to that guidance, we'll show up and we'll make mistakes, and it'll be messy. Sometimes we end up on, streets without street lights in the middle of a night in life-threatening circumstances. That's neither here nor there. But
fact or fiction, we'll never know.
When we live through it, like we are able to collect the data that helps us to cultivate wisdom and show up some more. And I think that's recovery, but also relationships in a nutshell. So hats off to you if you are actively seeking to date while sober. Dating, like somebody told me, who was it? It was my partner. We're going to have her on the show soon. My partner here in Detroit with the Phoenix, Kelsey. She said that it's hard making friends as an adult. And some people find it complicated. Like, it's not like we got a playground to go to and like, yay. So now you add in sobriety, you add in recovery and this intentional living, like you really like also weed out even more. But what I found is that weeding out, which we may at first think like, wow, I don't have any options. What it does is it really drills down to the most aligning options. And though you may not have like 300, 500 friends, and then somebody who's to sell drugs is past the limit of statute, I hope it is. But like I used to have like 500 contacts on my phone. My phone would ring every day, all day. And it was just like miles wide and like centimeters deep, right? But now, like, my phone doesn't, maybe my phone ring like 2 or 3 times a day. But who calls me, like, that's important. Like those relationships are deep, and so it may feel like you have less of a selection, but I promise you, the more you work on yourself, the more aligning those relationships will be to who it is that you're designing yourself to be.
Totally. Quality over quantity. And that's like, I mean, what could be better?
You see how Liz took everything that I said and just like 4 words, and I could have just said that.
A little bow. No, that was beautifully said, and I completely agree. And also, oh my gosh, the thought of the phone ringing all day, every day is like completely overwhelming to me. So,
man, I used to be addicted to that. Like, I'm important. Oh my goodness, I'm important. I remember because I got we all go through it, but I got caught, which is what happens when you do bad things. Eventually, it catches up to you, and then when I got out, I was looking at my phone and it wasn't ringing, and I was grieving. I'm like, I got to get back up. I got to make this phone ring again. And that's how I eventually got in trouble again. But that's neither here nor there. It may be a story for another time. But yeah, it's important for us to continue to cultivate a relationship with ourselves, and that will allow for us to show up for anybody else in our life, no matter what that relationship looks like. And so we have to ask you, if this is a topic that you all are interested in, like we would love to delve in more into it. I know this is an important topic. It's something that not a lot of people talk about. At least I haven't seen it. So if this interests you, hop into the app, the Phoenix app, and go into the podcast group and pop us, a little message in there. If this topic is something that resonates with you, and we'll do some more shows on it. We'll get some guests on here that can really speak to this topic. And also go in there and leave us some other topics too. What are you most interested in hearing about on this podcast? Because this is your show.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and if you know somebody who's an expert in this space, please send them our way, because we would love to chat with somebody who talks about this a little bit more deeply than we have. And
not for personal reasons at all.
I'm pointing at Bryce. All right, well, I adore you, Bryce. Thank you for doing this with me. Best partner ever.
Ditto, 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 ditto.
And thank you all for listening, for joining us, for hitting that subscribe button, for reviewing and rating, if you would be so kind, sending to a friend. We'll catch you next time.
See ya.
So now you're excited. Bryce, Liz, how do I get involved with the Phoenix? Well, my friend, it is super simple. We actually have an app. Head over to the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, or look in the show notes of this podcast, wherever you're listening to or watching this podcast, and go download the Phoenix app.
The Phoenix app makes it so easy to find classes that are near you, or to access our virtual class schedule where you can hop on from the comfort of your home. You can also join our groups and have a conversation with someone from the Phoenix community from anywhere in the world. Please make sure that you join the podcast group where you can connect with Bryce and I and other listeners. Everything that you need is in the show notes. You can also head to our website at www.thephoenix.org. And maybe while you're there, you click the volunteer tab and get even more involved.